The packages arrive at your door every afternoon, the fresh lettuce is always stocked at the grocery store, and the gas station is always staffed at 3 a.m. For most Americans, these are just facts of life, the smooth, constant hum of a functioning society. But this seamless existence is an elaborate performance made possible by an invisible working class. Millions of low-wage essential workers whose lives are rarely acknowledged outside of a holiday thank you or a pandemic designation. They are the true engine of the American economy, yet they remain its most undervalued component. Consider Maria, hunched over a row of strawberries in California's unforgiving heat. She has been picking produce for 15 years, her hands bearing the calluses of 1,000 sunrises. The work is physically brutal, the pay barely hovering above the federal minimum wage, and the threat of weather, illness, or injury hangs over her family's precarious financial stability. She works so that other families can enjoy food abundance, yet she and her family are statistically more likely to experience food insecurity themselves. When the world temporarily ground to a halt, Maria was declared essential, an acknowledgement that felt both hollow and ironic given her lack of health insurance and basic workplace protections. Her visibility spiked only because the country briefly feared an empty shelf, not because it cared about her welfare. Hundreds of miles away, in a sprawling warehouse on the outskirts of an industrial hub, works James. He navigates a logistics empire, his role as a warehouse associate being the critical link between order and delivery. He pulls, scans, and stacks thousands of items during his 12-hour night shift. The facility is automated, cold, and relentlessly metrics-driven. Management tracks his speed down to the second, fostering a high-pressure environment where every break is rushed and every lapse in pace is noted. James knows he is a cog in the machine that defines modern convenience, the ability to receive anything overnight, but the wages he earns require him to hold a second, part-time cleaning job just to cover his rent and childcare. The efficiency that benefits consumers comes directly at the expense of his sleep, his family time, and his physical health. The narratives of Maria in agriculture and James in logistics, two pillars of the modern supply chain, are not outliers. They represent the quiet majority of workers in sectors that run on thin margins and high turnover: home healthcare aides, fast food employees, sanitation workers, and gas station attendants. These workers are disproportionately immigrants, people of color, and those with lower levels of education, a demographic reality that often plays into the systemic devaluing of their labor. The societal indifference to their plight is baked into the very structure of their employment. Low pay, minimal benefits, unpredictable hours, and severely restricted collective bargaining power. During national crises, their essential status is briefly uplifted in headlines, serving as a reminder of their irreplaceability. Yet, once the crisis subsides, the spotlight moves on, and they fade back into the background, their economic insecurity deepening under the weight of rising costs of living. They are the ones who cannot work remotely, who must brave the elements, and who must show up every day, often choosing between their health and their paycheck. The American standard of living is predicated on the constant availability of goods and services, a luxury built upon the foundation of inexpensive, expendable labor. This invisible class is not just performing a job, they are subsidizing the comforts of the middle and upper classes through their underpaid sacrifice. Their struggle for a living wage, for paid sick leave, and for the right to organize is not just a matter of social justice. It is the fight to restore dignity to the work that truly holds America together. The nation cannot claim prosperity while its most essential workers are perpetually relegated to the margins, struggling to afford the very products they tirelessly provide. Their stories deserve to be seen, their value acknowledged, and their contributions justly rewarded. The manicured lawns of Oakwood Estate,
The American dream, that foundational myth of upward mobility and prosperity achieved through hard work, is often depicted as a single, shining road available to all. The textbook definition is simple: If you are diligent and determined, you can rise above your circumstances and secure a better life for yourself and your children. Yet for millions across the United States, this roadmap is misleading, a cruel mirage. The truth is that the American dream has two radically different faces, one of opportunity and access, and another of systemic barriers and intergenerational struggle. The core question is no longer how one achieves the dream, but who is granted the permission to pursue it on a level playing field. Consider the tale of twins, separated not by birth, but by neighborhood. David grew up in a comfortable, predominantly white suburb where the local school district was funded by high property taxes. His success was, in many ways, subsidized from the start. He attended a public high school, where advanced placement courses were standard, college counselors guided him through the application maze, and his parents could absorb the cost of SAT tutoring and university applications. His degree from a top state university led directly to a networking contact made through his father's golf club. For David, the dream operates as promised, a linear path where effort, studying, yields reward, a good job, and the debt incurred is a manageable investment in future earnings. His is the traditional face of the dream, a self-fulfilling prophecy of success based on inherent access. Contrast David's experience with that of Elena. Elena grew up in an inner-city neighborhood, an essential worker's daughter where her public school was underfunded and overcrowded. The focus wasn't on AP courses, but on security and simply graduating. She works twice as hard as David, taking on a part-time job during high school, navigating broken public transportation, and serving as an unpaid translator for her parents. When she finally scrapes together enough money for community college, she must choose a major based not on passion, but on its immediate job market utility, knowing that every semester must be paid for out of pocket. To her, the dream is not about exponential wealth. It's about financial stability, a secure lease, a car that reliably starts, and the ability to send money back to her parents without risking her own financial ruin. Elena is not pursuing the dream, she is chasing the starting line that David was born standing on. The disparity is deeply rooted in demographic factors. For many Black and Hispanic families, the dream is perpetually deferred by the lingering effects of historical injustices like redlining, which systematically lock them out of accumulating generational wealth through home ownership. The lack of inherited capital means every generation must build from scratch, often starting from a position of debt and precarious living. A small emergency can become a catastrophic financial setback, a burden that families with accumulated wealth simply absorb. For immigrants, the dream arrives in a form unrecognizable to native-born Americans. It's not about becoming a CEO. It's about the sheer radical accomplishment of safety, legal status, and educational opportunity for the next generation. A doctor who restarts her career as a taxi driver is not a failure of the dream, but a complex, painful sacrifice that redefines success. An act of intergenerational investment where the parent accepts a lower status so the child can potentially ascend to the traditional face of the dream. Ultimately, the American dream is not a single concept. It is a bifurcated reality. For some, it is an accessible escalator of opportunity, rewarding effort with exponential growth. For others, it is a brutal uphill climb against systemic headwinds, a struggle that demands extraordinary sacrifice just to reach a baseline of security. Until these fundamental disparities in access to quality education, healthcare, and inherited nature of the original wound, be it poverty, displacement, or discrimination, modern families can begin to differentiate between the historical threat and the present reality. Only then can Daniel realize that his current financial security is real, and only then can Mrs. Lee learn to open her heart without feeling that she is simultaneously jeopardizing her safety. The ultimate goal is not to forget the past, but to transform the heavy, inherited burden of silence into a shared narrative of resilience and healing. The town of Havenwood, nestled in a valley far from any major interstate, used to hum with the dependable rhythm of American life.
Its centerpiece, Main Street, was a vibrant strip lined with Mrs. Gable's Bakery, the local hardware store run by the Millers for 3 generations, and the single movie theater that doubled as a community hall. Today, Main Street is eerily quiet. Half the storefronts are boarded up, their paint peeling like old skin, and the only business attracting a crowd is the Dollar General on the edge of town, a symbol of corporate efficiency that drained the lifeblood from the smaller, locally owned shops. Havenwood is not unique. It is a microcosm of the silent small-town exodus sweeping across rural America, leaving behind a landscape struggling to maintain its purpose and its identity. The decline is multifaceted, but it begins primarily with the economic brain drain. Once the local factory closed, unable to compete with overseas production or urban tech giants, the town's young talent saw no future. Why stay to work minimum wage jobs when a city 2 hours away offers better pay, opportunities for advancement, and a social life beyond the Friday night football game? Educated young adults, crucial for injecting innovation and energy into a small community, leave for college and rarely return. This departure creates a vacuum. The tax base shrinks, the schools lose enrollment and funding, and the average age of the remaining population steadily climbs. 80-year-old Martha, who still runs the town's small independent bookstore, witnesses this decay every day. She remembers when the street was full of mothers pushing strollers and teenagers loitering after school. Now her biggest challenge is finding a replacement for her failing cash register. No one local has the technical skill to fix it, and the nearest certified technician charges a travel fee she can't afford. Martha represents the resilience of the generation that built these towns, but her tenacity can't stop the inevitable erosion of the infrastructure. The lack of essential services, reliable high-speed internet, quality healthcare beyond basic emergency care, and diverse employment options makes the town fundamentally uncompetitive in the 21st century economy. The most tragic consequence is the devastating loss of community identity. Small towns thrive on shared history and dense social networks. When the jobs leave, the people leave, and the institutions that held the community fabric together, the local newspaper, the volunteer fire department, the small church congregations, begin to crumble. Havenwood still holds its annual Founders' Day parade, but the floats are fewer, the spectators are grayer, and the mood is less celebratory and more melancholic, a ritual performed out of habit rather than genuine exuberance. The remaining residents face a difficult choice: accept the decline or desperately try to fight back. Many older residents refuse to leave, bound by inherited land and a profound love for the place where their roots run deep. They watch, often in quiet despair, as their grandchildren grow up in a world of online shopping and remote services, with no connection to the tactile face-to-face commerce that define their own lives. They feel abandoned by state and federal policies that favor metropolitan growth and overlook the unique challenges of dispersed, aging populations. The story of the small-town exodus is fundamentally an American tragedy of unfulfilled potential. It is the story of communities slowly being hollowed out, their economic relevance diminishing while their social and cultural.
The solution requires viewing broadband access not as a commercial product, but as a 21st century utility, a fundamental right analogous to electricity or water. Closing the gap demands massive federal and state investment in laying fiber optic cables in underserved areas, alongside programs that subsidize device access and digital literacy training. Until reliable, affordable connectivity reaches every American home, the promise of equal opportunity in the United States remains profoundly compromised. The invisible wires of the internet have become the new gatekeepers of success, and those left on the wrong side are facing not just slow loading times, but an irreversible stagnation of their potential. For millions of Americans, the fear of falling ill is less about the sickness itself and more about the devastating financial fallout that follows. Healthcare in the United States is not a safety net. It is often a complex, predatory labyrinth defined by opaque billing, soaring costs, and bureaucratic confusion. The result is a profound shared national anxiety, a constant low-grade dread that a single illness or accident could wipe out a lifetime of savings, leading to bankruptcy and ruin. Meet Robert, a middle manager at a manufacturing firm who, despite having good employer-sponsored health insurance, found himself trapped in this financial maze. Last year, his appendix ruptured unexpectedly. The surgery was successful, the hospital stayed short, and the initial relief was immense. Then the bills started arriving, a stack of cryptic documents filled with codes, charges, and demands. What was supposed to be covered by his insurance's in-network guarantee quickly became a nightmare of surprise billing. His surgeon was in-network, but the assisting anesthesiologist was not. The blood tests were processed by an out-of-network lab contracted by the in-network hospital. Each provider billed separately, turning a single medical event into a dozen unrelated financial crises. Robert spent weeks on the phone, wading through automated systems, arguing with billing clerks, and trying to reconcile the explanation of benefits, or EOB, with the actual bill. His deductible was met, his co-pays were paid, yet the total out-of-pocket balance still exceeded $15,000, a sum that meant draining his retirement savings and halting his daughter's college fund contributions. For Robert, the illness was over, but the medical debt crisis had just begun, leaving him financially weaker and emotionally scarred. Robert's experience is not exceptional. It is the statistical norm. Medical debt is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy in the U.S., proving that having insurance is often not a safeguard against financial catastrophe, but merely a ticket to a smaller, slightly less brutal catastrophe. The anxiety extends beyond the sudden emergency. It permeates preventative care and chronic illness management. Take Elena, a young teacher who manages type 1 diabetes. Her life depends on insulin, a drug whose price has soared by hundreds of % over the last decade. She spends hours every month scouring coupons, switching pharmacies, and timing her refills based on insurance cycles. When her high-deductible plan resets in January, she faces the terrifying reality of paying full retail price for life-saving medication until her deductible is met. She often rationally underspends, stretching her insulin supplies thin or skipping specialist visits, a terrifying negotiation between staying healthy and staying solvent. The constant stress of managing an arbitrary, exorbitant cost for a non-negotiable medication transforms chronic illness into chronic financial trauma. The ultimate cost of this labyrinthine system is not just measured in debt, but in deferred care. Millions of Americans avoid doctor visits, ignore symptoms, and skip necessary tests out of fear of the bill, turning manageable conditions into medical emergencies. They live in a state of perpetual risk assessment, weighing the severity of their physical symptoms.
Self-reliance inadvertently discourages people from admitting their need for others, allowing the condition to fester in silence. To combat this quiet epidemic, America needs to intentionally reconstruct the third spaces, the non-home, non-work places where casual connection thrives. This means reinvesting in community centers, strengthening local libraries, fostering neighborhood initiatives, and, crucially, learning to prioritize quality face-to-face interaction over quantity of digital connectivity. Until society acknowledges that connection is a vital necessity, not a casual amenity, the noise of digital life will continue to mask the heartbreaking silence of isolation. The smartphone applications that facilitate modern life promise convenience, flexibility, and the ability to be your own boss. This promise fuels the massive multi-billion-dollar gig economy, a sprawling network of contract drivers, delivery personnel, coders, and handymen who operate outside the traditional employer-employee structure. However, for the millions of people who form the backbone of this economy, the reality is a chronic and precarious existence on the margins, defined by a constant struggle for dignity against a backdrop of instability, lack of benefits, and systemic insecurity. Meet Ricardo, a 30-year-old father of two in Phoenix who drives for a major ride-sharing app. He was drawn to the gig economy after his company downsized, believing the advertised flexibility would allow him to manage his time and earn a good living. For a while, the freedom was appealing, but the reality of flexibility quickly revealed its dark side. The burden of risk is entirely his. Ricardo is classified as an independent contractor, which means he is responsible for 100% of his expenses: gas, insurance, maintenance, and the rapid depreciation of his only asset, his car. The company dictates his pay per trip and can instantly change the rate algorithm, leaving him with no negotiating power. Ricardo tracks his income obsessively, knowing that the company's advertised rate rarely accounts for the uncompensated time spent waiting for a fare, cleaning his car, or driving miles to a pickup location. After accounting for his operational costs, his effective hourly wage often barely clears minimum wage and sometimes dips below it. This precarious existence is compounded by the terrifying lack of a safety net. If he gets sick, there is no paid sick leave. If his car breaks down, his income stops immediately, yet his bills do not. He is constantly working under the threat of arbitrary deactivation, a loss of his livelihood based on a bad customer rating or a sudden policy change, with no real recourse or due process. The absence of benefits is the most significant erosion of dignity. Ricardo has no employer-sponsored health insurance. The cost of a private plan is prohibitive. He contributes nothing to Social Security via an employer match, and there is no retirement plan. The long-term implications are terrifying. The gig economy is creating a massive segment of the population that will age into retirement without adequate savings or health care, placing a future burden on public services. This precariousness extends to white-collar gig workers too. Sarah, a freelance editor, works for multiple platforms, juggling projects to maintain a steady flow of income. She faces wage compression, where platforms drive down rates by allowing a global pool of workers to bid on her local market projects. She spends countless hours on unpaid administrative work, drafting contracts, invoicing, and marketing herself, time that would be covered and simplified in a traditional role. Her constant hustle to secure the next contract leaves her mentally exhausted, turning the promise of being your own boss into the reality of being your own HR department, CFO, and marketing team, all without the protection of employment law. The struggle for dignity in the gig economy is the fight to have one's labor recognized as valuable and deserving of basic protections. It is the
Free resume workshops and the small business owners creating job training pipelines for previously incarcerated individuals. The stories of Marcus and the urban farmers highlight a crucial lesson. While top-down solutions are necessary for scale, it is the bottom-up, grassroots innovation that is often the most agile, personalized, and effective. These local actions, often implemented with minimal funding but maximum dedication, are a profound declaration of self-determination, proving that when the institutions fail, the true genius of the American system often lies with the people who refuse to wait for permission to solve their own problems. In contemporary America, where the national conversation often feels like a constant, aggressive clash of polarized ideologies, the simple act of shared, neutral existence has become a revolutionary necessity. We live in bubbles, digital and physical, that constantly reinforce our pre-existing beliefs, turning disagreement into enmity. However, there are still crucial, undervalued havens where differences are temporarily muted and common humanity prevails: the third spaces. These are the non-home, non-work public venues, libraries, public parks, local coffee shops, and community centers that offer a much-needed sanctuary in a polarized society, providing the crucial neutral ground where connections can be forged and community identity rebuilt. The quintessential example of this sanctuary is the public library. In the library, an architect can sit elbow to elbow with a homeless man, a college student working on a term paper, and a retiree using a free public computer. They are not there to debate politics, but to pursue individual interests under a shared roof of civic utility. The library's inherent neutrality, its silence, and its mission to provide resources without judgment strip away the usual identity markers that drive conflict. It is a space defined by access, not exclusion. Here, people unconsciously engage in a powerful form of non-confrontational civic life, sharing space and breathing the same air in pursuit of quiet self-improvement. Beyond the library, the local public park serves a similar function. In the community park on a Saturday morning, the common ground is literal. A liberal yoga group practices near a conservative church picnic. Children from different economic backgrounds chase the same ball across the grass. The focus shifts from ideological purity to immediate shared experience, the joy of sunshine, the sound of laughter, the simple act of being outdoors. The park is a great leveler. The demands of dogs needing to be walked and children needing to be supervised naturally supersede the often manufactured outrage that dominates online discourse. These spaces force a practical, humanistic lens onto interaction. Consider the role of the local independent coffee shop, not a corporate chain, but the spot run by a local owner that welcomes regulars. Here, people come for caffeine, but stay for the background buzz of local life. The conversations overheard are usually not about national policy, but about local school board elections, the recent town festival, or the weather. These are conversations of mutual dependence and local interest, forcing residents to recognize that they share a common fate tied to the well-being of their specific geography. When neighbors talk about filling potholes or improving the local school, they are engaging in civic dialogue that transcends the national partisan noise. The importance of third spaces lies in their ability to foster weak ties, the casual, non-intimate relationships that sociologists argue are essential for a functioning, resilient society. Strong ties, family and close friends, reinforce what we already know. Weak ties introduce us to different perspectives, temper our extremes, and provide unexpected sources of information and help. When these weak ties disappear, isolation grows and society becomes more brittle and prone to fracture. These neutral sanctuaries act as vital pressure release valves for a polarized culture. They are places where Americans can temporarily lay down the armor of their political identities and simply exist as neighbors, parents, or human beings seeking quiet solitude or shared activity. In its ability to absorb, adapt, and integrate diverse influences. The struggle and success of immigrant families, from the farm to the food truck, is being tasted, celebrated, and normalized every single day, proving that the most delicious and lasting form of American identity is perpetually being cooked up at the intersection of tradition and change. The generation of young Americans, millennials and Gen Z, is often characterized by older generations as entitled or overly idealistic. However, beneath the noise of online activism and cultural trends lies a profound shift in perspective. They are, in a unique way, the unburdened voice of the nation, unburdened by the same economic myths and political constraints that defined their parents' lives. This demographic cohort, having inherited a landscape marked by climate crisis, staggering student debt, and deep-seated inequality, is not merely adapting. They are fundamentally reimagining the future with a pragmatic, often radical set of demands regarding work, climate, and social change. One of the most striking areas of divergence is the redefinition of work and success. The post-war ideal of lifelong loyalty to a single company in exchange for stable retirement benefits has evaporated under the weight of the gig economy and corporate downsizing. Young workers have internalized that the promise of job security is a myth. Consequently, their priority has shifted from career ladder climbing to work-life integration and value alignment. Sarah, a 25-year-old marketing professional, perfectly encapsulates this shift. She left a high-paying, high-stress corporate job because the company's stated values did not align with its internal practices or environmental record. She now works for a smaller, certified B Corp, earning less but feeling a greater sense of purpose.
For Sarah's generation, a job is not just a paycheck, it is an ethical statement. They are demanding transparency, flexibility, like permanent remote or hybrid options, and demonstrable social responsibility from employers, often choosing to unionize or change jobs rather than tolerate exploitative or morally questionable environments. This is not laziness. It is a pragmatic realization that since the company offers no lifetime guarantee, they must prioritize their own well-being and moral compass over institutional loyalty. The second inescapable burden they face is the climate crisis. Unlike previous generations that viewed climate change as a future problem or a political talking point, young Americans experience it as an immediate existential threat, a fact that influences everything from where they choose to live to whether they decide to have children. This is the generation that grew up with relentless wildfires, extreme weather events, and recurring climate reports that paint a dire future. This reality has catalyzed a demand for systemic, immediate policy changes. Their activism transcends simple environmentalism. It is deeply intertwined with social justice. They understand that marginalized communities, often the least responsible for carbon emissions, bear the brunt of climate disaster. This interconnected view drives their unique calls for Green New Deal-style solutions that simultaneously address economic inequality and environmental stewardship. They are unburdened by the fossil fuel economy's legacy investments and thus far more willing to embrace radical, rapid transition. Finally, the unburdened voice is driving a new era of social change, particularly regarding identity and justice. Having grown up in a more diverse and globally connected environment, they are far less tolerant of historical inequities. They are pushing for a radical reevaluation of institutional norms, from education curricula that ignore minority history to legal systems that perpetuate racial bias. The conversations around gender identity, neurodiversity, and mental health are driven by a young generation that demands institutions reflect the complexity and dignity of all individual experiences. In essence, young Americans are not just complaining about the world they inherited, they're applying practical solutions to existential threats. They view problems through the lens of intersectionality, realizing that issues like economic precarity, environmental
Human being over the abstract ideological fight. It is the retired nurse from the opposing political party who sits with a young mother's sick child in the emergency room. It is the farmer who offers his expensive equipment to a struggling neighbor regardless of their voting history. These acts are not passive charity, they are active, deliberate affirmations of community over faction. They remind Americans that their political identities, however passionate, are only one part of their whole selves. In the privacy of their front yard or the chaotic energy of disaster relief, people revert to a primal, necessary contract. We are in this place and in this life together. These pockets of genuine connection are the essential counter-narrative to the polarization narrative, demonstrating that the capacity for grace and mutual aid is still the deepest, most resilient current in the American spirit. We have traveled through the hidden corners of the American experience, moving from the invisible struggles of the working class and the quiet desperation behind suburban tranquility through the systemic barriers of the bifurcated American dream and into the profound loneliness of a connected society. We have witnessed the crushing weight of medical debt and the fight for dignity in the gig economy. The undeniable, hard truth is that the seamless, prosperous image America projects to the world is subsidized by widespread precarity, fear, and silence. This truth acknowledges the complexity, that the systems designed to offer stability often breed fragility, and that the greatest struggles are those we refuse to name and see. The complex issues explored, the two-faced nature of opportunity, the inherited burden of trauma, the erosion of essential community spaces, are not isolated failures. They are interconnected symptoms of a deep structural rift. When a small town dies, its young talent moves to a city where they might face overwhelming medical debt. Their isolation is then exacerbated by the very remote work that was supposed to save them time. When gig workers are denied benefits, they contribute to the national anxiety surrounding healthcare. The system's weaknesses feed into one another, creating a reinforcing cycle of insecurity that affects nearly every demographic, regardless of political affiliation or initial wealth. The true division in America is not merely political, it is a division between the visible reality of success and the invisible reality of struggle. This visibility gap is the primary obstacle to change. The affluent suburbanite behind the white picket fence and the low-wage worker in the warehouse are both, in their own ways, trapped by a culture